Nia Benette was halfway through a presentation when she realized something was wrong. Not with the presentation. The presentation was excellent. The quarterly projections were solid. The client was engaged. The executive team was asking intelligent questions. Everything was proceeding exactly as it should. The problem was her phone, specifically the fact that Terry had not answered her text. Normally, that would not have mattered. Normally, Nia was a reasonable adult. Normally, she did not notice things like response times. But Terry always answered. Not immediately, not obsessively, just consistently, which meant that 23 hours of silence felt unusual. Nia immediately informed herself that she was being ridiculous. Then she checked her phone again during a restroom break. Still nothing. Ridiculous. Completely ridiculous. And yet, something tugged at her. A feeling she couldn't quite identify. Concern, maybe. The presentation ended shortly after 4. Nia returned to her office. The moment she sat down, her phone rang. Terry. Relief hit so quickly she nearly frowned at herself. Interesting, very interesting, dangerous. She answered immediately. You're alive. A pause, then, that's a concerning greeting. Nia relaxed into her chair. Where have you been? The silence that followed lasted just long enough to matter. Her posture straightened. Terry? I'm fine. The answer came too carefully. Nia knew that tone. People used it when they weren't fine. What happened? Another pause. Longer. Then, can I buy you dinner? Nia sat up. Now she was officially concerned. Because Terry Kang did not dodge questions. Not usually. What happened? Dinner. Terry. Dinner. Nia narrowed her eyes. I hate when you do this. I know. What happened? Dinner. She sighed. Hard. Deliberately, the sigh of a woman being emotionally blackmailed with restaurant reservations. Fine. 7? Where, Tsa? The Italian place. Nia blinked. The Italian place. Not coffee, not casual, not their usual. Interesting. Very interesting. Terry? Yes? Now I'm worried. His laugh sounded tired. That worried her more. By 7 o'clock, Nia had convinced herself of approximately 14 different worst-case scenarios. None of them proved accurate. Mostly. The restaurant overlooked the city from the 32nd floor of a downtown tower. Soft lighting, white tablecloths, floor-to-ceiling windows, the kind of place where water arrived in bottles with accents. Terry was already waiting. The moment she saw him, she knew something was wrong. Not catastrophic wrong. Just heavy. The easy lightness she associated with him seemed muted. His smile appeared, but it arrived late, as though he had to remember to wear it. Nia slid into the chair opposite him. What happened? Straight to the point. No small talk, no warm-up. Terry sighed. Hello, Nia. No. Nia. No. The corner of his mouth twitched. Progress. What happened? The waiter appeared. An unfortunate tactical interruption. Drink orders were placed. Menus opened. Menus closed. The waiter disappeared. Nia looked at Terry expectantly. Waiting. Terry looked out the window, then back at her. My grandmother escalated. Nia blinked. The folder grandmother? The very same. Some tension eased from her chest. Not illness, not scandal, not disaster. Good. Then she noticed Terry still wasn't smiling. The relief faded. What happened? He folded his hands. For a moment, he looked less like the man she met for coffee and more like the billionaire executive who negotiated impossible situations for a living. Measured. Controlled. Careful. The change unsettled her. She arranged introductions. Nia winced. How many? 3. Oh, no. Correct. She covered her mouth, not because it wasn't serious, because it was, and because it was slightly funny. Terry pointed at her. You promised support. I did not. You implied support. I implied amusement. Traitor. The exchange felt familiar, comfortable. Then Terry's smile faded again. The room seemed quieter. Nia felt her stomach tighten. Terry. His gaze lifted. My family expects me to marry. The words landed differently this time. More serious. More final. Not matchmaking grandmother funny. Dynasty expectations serious. Nia understood immediately. Because powerful families had always operated differently. Wealth protected people from many things. Expectations were not one of them. What happens if you refuse? Terry looked out the window. The city lights reflected in the glass. They keep pushing. And eventually, a pause. Then, they stop asking. Something about his tone made her uneasy. How? His laugh carried no humor. Usually because they get what they want. The answer settled heavily between them. For the first time, Nia understood the scale of the problem. This wasn't family nagging. This wasn't an overbearing grandmother. This was legacy, business, control, generations of expectations. The waiter arrived with appetizers. Neither touched them. Halfway through dinner, the conversation drifted elsewhere. Work, family, current events, normal things. Yet the earlier discussion lingered beneath everything. Nia could feel it, like a storm waiting offshore. Eventually, Terry set down his glass. The movement was small, but deliberate. Nia, her pulse jumped. No reason. None whatsoever. Yes? He hesitated. Actually hesitated. The sight alone was alarming. Terry rarely seemed uncertain. Nia. Now she was definitely worried. What? He exhaled slowly, then looked directly at her. And suddenly every instinct she possessed went on alert. Not danger, significance. The feeling that something important was about to happen. I have an idea. Nia narrowed her eyes. Historically, those words never led anywhere safe. What kind of idea? A practical one. That was worse, much worse. Terry's practical ideas tended to involve absurd levels of planning. She sat back, listening, waiting, bracing. What if we got married? The restaurant disappeared. Not literally, just temporarily. Nia stared. Terry stared back. Calmly, entirely too calmly. Nia blinked. Once, twice, 3 times. Then, what? Contractually, the clarification did not help. At all. What? Terry remained infuriatingly composed. Contract marriage. Nia laughed. A short burst of disbelief, then stopped when Terry didn't join her. Oh, he was serious. Very serious. Terry? Yes? Have you suffered a head injury? No. Recently? No. Nia stared. The city glittered beyond the windows. The waiter moved between tables. Someone laughed in the distance. Reality continued normally despite the fact that Terry Kang had apparently lost his mind. You want us to get married? Temporarily. Temporarily. Yes. Nia repeated the word several times internally. It continued making no sense. Why? Terry's answer arrived immediately, because he'd clearly thought about it. A lot. Which somehow made it worse. My family stops pushing. Okay, logical. And? He looked at her. Steady. Focused. You're opening your own firm next year. Nia froze. The air seemed to shift. Because she hadn't told many people that, only a handful, very few. The plan remained mostly private. You remembered. The words escaped before she could stop them. Terry looked confused. Of course I remembered. The answer hit unexpectedly hard, not because it was romantic, because it was Terry. Remembering things had become his superpower. Dangerous, attractive superpower. Nia looked away, regrouping. That doesn't explain marriage. No. His voice softened. It explains why I thought you'd understand practicality. The conversation slowed, deepened. Terry leaned forward slightly. There would be clear terms. Of course there would. The man probably had spreadsheets, lawyers, flowcharts, possibly a presentation. The thought almost made her smile. Almost. We would help each other. Nia studied him. The certainty, the calm, the trust. Because that was what startled her most, not the proposal. The trust. Terry genuinely believed she would never take advantage of him. And somehow she knew he wouldn't take advantage of her either. The realization felt unexpectedly intimate. Terry? His gaze held hers. Why me? The question emerged softly. Honest. Real. Not why a contract. Why me? For the first time all evening, Terry looked away. The reaction lasted only a second. But Nia noticed. Because she had started noticing him. A lot. His jaw tightened slightly. His fingers tapped once against the table, then stopped. I trust you. The answer was simple. Too simple. Something in her chest fluttered. Uncomfortably. That's all? Terry met her gaze again, and for one impossible moment she thought he might say something else, something bigger, something dangerous. Instead, he smiled. Small. Controlled. Isn't that enough? Nia didn't answer. Because she wasn't sure. And because a tiny part of her was suddenly disappointed. The realization startled her. Deeply. Terribly. Dangerously. The waiter arrived with dessert. Neither touched it. The conversation moved elsewhere, yet nothing truly changed. Because the question remained. Waiting. Lingering. Following her all the way home. At midnight, Nia sat alone in her apartment staring at the city lights beyond her balcony. A contract marriage, the idea was absurd, completely absurd. And yet, not entirely. That was the problem. The practical side of her understood it. The ambitious side of her understood it. The business-minded woman who built strategic plans for a living understood it. The emotional side? That side was having concerns. Because a contract marriage required trust, closeness, partnership, shared space, shared lives. And the truth she didn't want to examine was simple. The idea wasn't frightening because she disliked Terry. The idea was frightening because she liked him. Far more than she was supposed to. Across the city, Terry stood beside his penthouse window holding a glass of water he hadn't touched. His grandmother's folder sat unopened in a drawer. The contract marriage proposal now existed in the world, spoken aloud, real. And for the first time since college, Terry found himself genuinely uncertain. Not about the contract, about Nia, because he could survive her rejection. He'd done it silently for years. What he wasn't sure he could survive was her acceptance, because pretending not to love her had been difficult enough. Pretending to be her husband might prove impossible. Nia Benette spent 6 days avoiding Terry Kang. Not successfully, just enthusiastically. The distinction mattered. Day 1 involved convincing herself she needed time to think. Day 2 involved reorganizing her apartment pantry. Day 3 involved working 14 consecutive hours. Day 4 included a color-coded pros and cons list. Day 5 produced a second color-coded pros and cons list because the first one felt emotionally biased. By day 6, Nia had become deeply suspicious of her own judgment. The problem was that every practical argument favored the contract marriage. Every emotional argument terrified her. Which was unfortunate because emotions rarely respected logic. Her phone vibrated. Terry, you are avoiding me? Nia immediately ignored the message. 30 seconds later. Terry, poorly. She sighed. Another message arrived. Terry, Professionally speaking, your avoidance strategy lacks discipline. Nia, I am thinking. Terry, you reorganized your pantry. Nia, how do you know that? Terry, you posted a picture. Nia stared. Right, she had. Lena, my sister has finally lost her mind. Attached beneath Lena's comment had been a photograph of 6 perfectly aligned shelves and 43 labeled storage containers. Wonderful. Terry, the flower has its own category. Nia, it deserved one. Terry, naturally. Nia, stop making fun of me. Terry, never. A smile appeared despite her best efforts. Annoying. Extremely annoying. Terry, dinner. Nia, that isn't a question. Terry, correct. Nia, bossy. Terry, efficient. Nia, no. Terry, 7. Nia, no. Terry, I'll order dessert. Nia, Terry, I accept your surrender. By 7 o'clock, Nia was seated across from him at their usual restaurant. She hated how relieved she felt. The previous week had felt strangely off balance, as though something important had been missing. The realization alone nearly sent her back out the door. Terry studied her over his menu. You look troubled. You proposed marriage. Contract marriage. That distinction is carrying a lot of weight. It is an important distinction. Nia pointed at him. See, that's exactly the kind of sentence that worries me. The corner of his mouth twitched. Progress. She'd missed that expression. Dangerous thought. Very dangerous. The waiter delivered drinks. Nia wrapped both hands around hers. Stalling. Terry waited. Patiently. He was entirely too good at waiting. Finally, she sighed. I made lists. His eyebrows lifted. Multiple lists? She narrowed her eyes. Don't! You made multiple lists. Yes. His smile widened. Oh, this is serious. Nia considered throwing a breadstick at him. The temptation was powerful. I hate that you know me. No, you don't. The answer came immediately, confidently, warmly, and the irritating part was that he was right. She didn't hate it. Not even a little. The realization settled between them. Soft, uncomfortable, real. Nia looked away first, again, a disturbing pattern. So, Terry said gently, what's the verdict? The question silenced her. Because despite all the lists and spreadsheets and late-night overthinking, the truth remained complicated. She trusted him. That was the problem, not the solution. The problem. Trust made things messy. Trust created risk. Trust opened doors that were easier left closed. Nia looked down at the table, then back at him. Tell me exactly what you're proposing. Relief flashed briefly across his face, not because she'd agreed, because she hadn't left, because she was listening. 1 year? Nia nodded. Reasonable. Publicly married? Still reasonable. Separate finances? Good. Separate professional lives? Better. Either party can terminate the agreement after 12 months. She listened carefully. The structure made sense. Of course it did. Terry had probably spent days analyzing contingencies, possibly weeks. The man planned vacations like military operations. What about living arrangements? His expression remained neutral, mostly. We'd need to share a residence, Nia froze. There it was, the dangerous part. Not paperwork, not publicity, proximity. Terry apparently recognized the problem. Because he added quickly, but there are 11 bedrooms, she laughed. The sound escaped unexpectedly. 11? The house is unnecessarily large. That's ridiculous. I agree. Why do you need 11 bedrooms? I don't. Then why? My grandfather liked architecture. Nia laughed harder. Terry smiled. The tension eased. Slightly. Then she noticed something. He looked nervous. Not visibly, not obviously. Most people would miss it. Nia didn't. His shoulders carried a fraction more tension. His answers arrived a fraction too quickly. His gaze lingered on her a fraction too long. The realization startled her. Terry was worried. About her answer. About her. The thought settled somewhere deep inside her chest. Warm, dangerous, unexpected. 3 days later, Nia found herself standing in front of Terry's house. Calling it a house felt dishonest. Estate seemed more accurate. The property sat behind wrought iron gates and mature oak trees. Stone pathways wound through carefully maintained gardens. Tall windows reflected the afternoon sunlight. The place looked like the setting of a movie, where someone inherited generational wealth and emotional repression. Terry opened the front door before she could ring the bell. You made it. Nia looked at him, then at the house, then back at him. I have questions. Many people do. How many square feet is this? Terry considered. Then, I'm afraid to answer. She groaned. That was answer enough. Inside, the house somehow became more ridiculous. High ceilings, hardwood floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, a staircase large enough to host political events. Everything elegant, everything expensive, everything surprisingly warm. Not cold, not sterile, lived in. The realization surprised her. She had expected a billionaire's house to feel like a museum. Instead, it felt like a home. Terry watched her quietly. What? She glanced toward him. Nothing. You have a look. I do not. You do. Nia sighed. I expected something different. Such as? She gestured vaguely. More billionaire. Terry laughed. What does that even mean? Less comfortable. His smile softened. The reaction seemed oddly meaningful, as though she'd unknowingly touched something important. My mother hated uncomfortable houses. The statement arrived quietly, unexpectedly. Nia paused. She knew very little about Terry's family beyond the occasional grandmother story. The vulnerability caught her off guard. What was she like? For a moment he looked surprised, then thoughtful. Warm. The answer came immediately, without hesitation. She made people feel welcome. Something in his expression shifted, gentled, softened. Nia suddenly wished she'd known her. The thought arrived from nowhere and stayed. The tour ended in a sunlit kitchen overlooking the back gardens. Terry leaned against the island. Nia stood across from him. Silence settled between them. Not uncomfortable, just significant. Because both knew why she was there, the house wasn't the point. The contract wasn't the point. The future was the point, and neither seemed entirely certain what to do with it. Finally, Terry spoke. You don't have to say yes. The statement surprised her because he'd never pressured her, not once. Not at dinner, not over text, not during the tour, not now. You know that, right? Nia looked at him. Really looked. The steady patience, the careful restraint, the quiet concern. The man who remembered highlighters, the man who sent pastries, the man who somehow always noticed when she needed someone. And suddenly she realized something. The thing frightening her wasn't the contract. It wasn't public perception. It wasn't family expectations. It wasn't even the possibility of failure. It was the possibility of success. Because if she said yes, she'd spend a year beside Terry, a year seeing him every day, a year learning him, a year depending on him. And if she wasn't careful, she might fall in love with him. The thought stole her breath. Not because it felt impossible, because it felt possible. Very possible. Dangerously possible. Terry. His gaze held hers. Yes? Nia swallowed, then smiled. Small, nervous, real. I have one condition. His eyebrows lifted, immediately interested. What condition? She crossed her arms, pretending confidence, failing slightly. No lawyers in the first meeting. Terry stared, then laughed. A real laugh, warm and surprised. The sound filled the kitchen. Relief flashed across his face so quickly she almost missed it. Almost. That's your condition? Yes. He shook his head, still smiling. Done. Nia nodded slowly, then took a breath, and stepped forward. Not into the future. Not yet. Just toward the possibility of it. Okay. Terry went very still. The room seemed to follow. Okay? Nia smiled again, this time a little wider. Let's talk about the contract. For one brief second, pure happiness appeared on Terry's face before he hit it. Too late, Nia saw it. And for reasons she couldn't quite explain, seeing him happy made her happy too. Neither of them realized it, but somewhere between the engagement party and this moment, the contract had already become the least important part of the story. The contract took 12 days. Not because either of them was difficult, because both of them were. Lawyers reviewed language, financial advisors reviewed language, accountants reviewed language. Then, the lawyers reviewed the revised language. At one point, Nia became convinced the contract was reproducing overnight. Every time she opened her email, new pages appeared, new clauses, new revisions, new explanations. By the end of the second week, she had signed enough documents to purchase a small country, or possibly become one. The actual wedding happened 3 weeks later. It lasted 11 minutes. Nia timed it. The ceremony took place in a private garden behind the Kang estate. No media, no elaborate guest list, no orchestra, just immediate family and a handful of trusted friends, which somehow made it feel more real. The afternoon sunlight filtered through old oak trees. Cream-colored roses lined the stone pathway. A soft breeze carried the scent of blooming jasmine. Nia stood beneath a floral arch wearing a simple ivory dress. Nothing extravagant, nothing dramatic. She had intentionally avoided looking like a bride. Unfortunately, the universe had ignored her preferences. You look beautiful. Lena appeared beside her. Nia smiled. You are legally required to say that. No. Her sister's expression softened. I'm really happy for you. The words landed unexpectedly. Not because Nia doubted them. Because she believed them. Lena looked genuinely delighted. Not suspicious. Not concerned. Happy. The realization loosened something inside her chest. Thanks. Lena linked their arms together. You know. That tone worried Nia immediately. What? You smile differently around Terry. Nia nearly tripped. Wonderful. Just wonderful. I do not. You do. I don't. You absolutely do. Nia stared ahead, determined, focused, refusing engagement. Lena grinned. Dangerous, entirely too observant. You like him? Nia groaned. Go away. Her sister laughed. Mission accomplished. The ceremony itself passed in a blur. Words, promises, signatures, witnesses, smiles. Then suddenly it was over. The officiant pronounced them husband and wife. Applause followed. Nia looked up. Terry was watching her. Not the crowd, not the ceremony. Her. His expression carried something she couldn't quite identify. Warmth. Relief. Maybe both. The moment lingered. Then people moved forward to congratulate them. And reality resumed. Mostly. 3 days later, Nia moved into the Kang estate, or, as she privately called it, the mansion of excessive square footage. Terry met her at the front door. One suitcase rested beside him. Nia frowned. That's all you packed? That's all you packed? Fair point. They stared at each other, then laughed simultaneously. The tension eased. A little. The truth was neither of them knew how to do this. Friendship was one thing. Marriage, even pretend marriage, was something else entirely. Terry picked up her suitcase. Come on. Nia followed him inside. The house felt different now. Not because it had changed, Because she had. Every room seemed to carry new meaning. The kitchen, the living room, the gardens, the staircase. This wasn't Terry's house anymore. Not entirely. It was theirs. The realization made her stomach flutter. Dangerous. Very dangerous. Terry stopped outside a set of double doors. "This is your suite." Nia blinked. "Suite?" His expression immediately became cautious. Apparently, he'd said the wrong thing. "Terry, yes? How many bedrooms are attached to this suite?" "A reasonable number." "Terry, 3." Nia stared. 3. She had lived in apartments smaller than his guest accommodations. "This is absurd." "I know. No, really. I know." She laughed. Because what else could she do? The man was impossible, and somehow still endearing. The first week passed surprisingly well, mostly because both of them were busy. Nia threw herself into work. Terry disappeared into meetings, their schedules rarely aligned, which should have made things easier. Instead, Nia found herself noticing his absence. A troubling development. On Wednesday evening, she arrived home after 9. The house felt unusually quiet. She dropped her purse near the entryway, kicked off her shoes, then followed the smell of food into the kitchen. Terry stood at the stove, cooking. Nia stopped, blinking, processing, recalculating. "Terry." He glanced over his shoulder. "You're home." "You cook?" His expression became offended. "Of course I cook." "No." "Yes." "No." Why is that surprising? Nia gestured vaguely. "You're a billionaire." The answer seemed self-evident. Terry looked horrified. "Billionaires have to eat." "Not with actual pans." His offense deepened. The sight delighted her. "I need you to understand how insulting this is." Nia laughed, then glanced toward the stove. "What are you making?" "Pasta." She stared, then looked at him, then back at the pasta. Something inside her softened. A tiny shift. Small, yet significant. Because nobody had cooked for her in years. Not intentionally, not thoughtfully, not because they'd noticed she would arrive home exhausted. Terry returned his attention to the sauce, entirely unaware of the effect. Or pretending to be. With him, it was difficult to tell. "Sit." Nia obeyed. Which should probably concern her. The pasta was excellent. Annoyingly excellent. Nia informed him of this repeatedly. Terry accepted the compliments with entirely too much satisfaction. By the end of dinner, both were laughing. The sound filled the kitchen, warm, easy, natural. Nia couldn't remember the last time being with someone felt so effortless. That realization followed her upstairs. And lingered. A week later, the first problem appeared. It arrived disguised as breakfast. Nia entered the kitchen carrying her laptop. Terry sat at the island reviewing documents. Coffee steamed beside him. Morning sunlight streamed through the windows. The scene looked absurdly domestic. Dangerously domestic. "Morning." Terry glanced up, then smiled. There it was, that smile. The one becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. "Morning." Nia opened her laptop. Attempting professionalism. Focus, discipline. Then froze. A plate sat beside her chair. Breakfast. Prepared. Waiting. She looked at it, then at Terry, then back at the plate. "Terry?" "Hmm?" "You made breakfast." "Correct." "Why?" The question seemed reasonable. Terry looked confused. Because apparently it wasn't. "You forgot yesterday." Nia blinked. "What?" "You forgot breakfast yesterday." His attention returned to the documents. The explanation delivered casually, as though it wasn't remarkable, as though remembering her eating habits was completely normal. Nia stared. "You remembered that?" Terry looked up. His expression softened. Just slightly. Of course I remembered. The answer hit harder than it should have. Again. Of course I remembered. He said it so easily, so naturally, like remembering her mattered, like she mattered. The realization settled heavily between them. Terry seemed to recognize it too, because the kitchen suddenly felt quieter, smaller, more intimate. Neither spoke. For a long moment, morning sunlight stretched across the marble countertop while something unspoken hovered in the air. Not romance, not yet, but awareness. The beginning of it, the dangerous edge of it. Finally, Terry cleared his throat. You should eat. Nia smiled slowly, trying to ignore the strange warmth spreading through her chest, trying to ignore how much she liked hearing that someone remembered things about her, trying to ignore how much she liked him. All increasingly impossible tasks. Across the island, Terry returned to his paperwork, pretending concentration, failing, because he could still feel her looking at him, and because every day they spent together made maintaining his boundaries a little harder. The contract had been designed to solve a problem. Instead, it was creating one, a much bigger one, and neither of them seemed capable of stopping it. The problem with happiness was that it made people careless. Nia Benette realized this on a rainy Thursday evening while standing barefoot in Terry's kitchen eating strawberries directly from the container. 3 months earlier, she would have been horrified by the behavior. Now she was discussing quarterly projections while leaning against the kitchen island, wearing one of Terry's oversized university sweatshirts. The sweatshirt itself raised questions. Several questions. Questions Nia was determined not to examine, especially because she had stolen it. Technically borrowed it. Permanently. Terry walked into the kitchen carrying a tablet. He stopped, looked at the strawberries, looked at Nia, then looked back at the strawberries. Those were for dessert. Nia popped another berry into her mouth. They still can be. His eyes narrowed. She smiled. Terry sighed dramatically. The disrespect, the resilience, the theft, the adaptation. Terry laughed. The sound bounced through the kitchen. Warm, easy, dangerously familiar. The realization struck Nia unexpectedly. This felt real. Not contract real. Not pretend real. Real, real. The thought should have alarmed her. Instead, it made her happy, which was significantly worse. Later that night, a storm rolled across Atlanta. Rain struck the windows. Thunder rumbled in the distance. The house settled into quiet. Nia sat curled into one corner of the library sofa, reviewing notes for an upcoming presentation. Terry occupied the opposite end. Reading. At least he appeared to be reading. Nia had noticed something over the past several months. Terry spent an unusual amount of time pretending to read while watching her. The realization remained deeply suspicious. She lowered her laptop. Terry. Can I ask you something? His gaze lifted, immediately attentive, always attentive. The thought made her chest do something annoying. Of course, Nia hesitated. The question had been growing quietly for weeks, months maybe. Ever since the coffee shop, ever since the highlighters, ever since she'd begun realizing Terry remembered impossible things. You noticed me in college. The room became very still. Rain tapped softly against the windows. Terry's expression revealed nothing, which revealed everything. Because she had become good at reading him. And right now he looked cautious. Very cautious. Yes. The answer came quietly. No denial. Interesting. Nia set aside her laptop. How much? The question hung between them. Terry looked toward the fireplace, then back at her. Nia. The warning was immediate. She ignored it. Naturally. How much? A muscle moved in his jaw. The silence stretched. Then, a lot. The answer landed softly, yet somehow shook something loose inside her. Because she'd expected evasion, deflection, humor. Instead, she'd gotten honesty. Nia swallowed. A lot? Terry exhaled slowly. like a man stepping onto unstable ground. You want the truth? The question startled her, because something in his voice sounded different, heavier, real. Nia nodded. Yes. Another long silence, then Terry closed his book, set it aside, and looked directly at her. The storm outside seemed to fade. The room narrowed. Everything focused. Terry? His gaze never left hers. When you were a sophomore, you sat in the third row of Professor Whitaker's economics class. Nia blinked. What? You always arrived 10 minutes early. Her heartbeat stumbled. Terry! You carried a blue notebook. The room suddenly felt smaller. You color-coded your notes. She couldn't speak. You corrected the professor 3 times during the first month. The words kept coming. Steady. Certain. Years old. And perfectly remembered. Nia stared. Unable to move, unable to breathe. Because nobody remembered those things, not after a decade. Not unless... Oh my God. Terry smiled sadly. There it was. The realization. The one he'd spent years avoiding. Nia. You remember all of that. His smile widened slightly, without humor, without defense. Just truth. Yes. The answer hit like a wave, not because of what he'd said, because of what he hadn't. The implication, the meaning, the years hidden behind those memories. Nia sat frozen, then whispered, Why? The question emerged so softly she barely heard it herself. Why remember? Why notice? Why care? Terry looked away. For the first time all evening, the movement seemed almost involuntary, as though honesty had reached its limit. Terry. His eyes closed briefly, then opened, and when he looked back at her, something had changed. The distance was gone, the protection, the careful boundaries. Gone. I had a crush on you. The confession settled into the room. Simple. Quiet. Devastating. Nia stared. The storm outside seemed louder suddenly. Rain. Thunder. Wind. Everything rushing back. You? Her voice failed. Terry smiled faintly. Yes. You were my college crush. The irony made him laugh softly, a little helplessly. I know. Nia blinked. You knew? Marcus told me. Of course he had. The answer somehow made everything worse. And better. And infinitely more complicated. Nia stood abruptly, not because she was upset, because she needed movement, air, perspective, something. She crossed toward the windows. The city lights shimmered through sheets of rain. Behind her, Terry remained silent, giving her space, always giving her space. The realization hit unexpectedly hard. He'd known, all those years, known she liked Marcus, known she didn't see him, known she was building dreams around someone else. And he'd said nothing. Not because he lacked confidence, not because he didn't care, because he cared too much. Terry, his voice came quietly. Yes? Nia turned, slowly, looking at him differently than she ever had before. Not billionaire, not friend, not husband. Man. Just a man who had carried a secret for years. Why didn't you tell me? The question hurt. Not because she was angry, because she genuinely wanted to understand. Terry looked down briefly, then back up. His expression softened. Nia. The way he said her name made her heart ache. You were happy. The answer confused her. What? You weren't mine to interrupt. The room fell silent. Completely silent. Nia couldn't speak. Because suddenly she understood. The coffee invitations. The patience. The kindness. The restraint. The impossible memory. None of it had started at the engagement party. The engagement party had simply been the first time he allowed himself to step closer. The first time he'd believed she needed him. The first time he'd stopped standing across the room. Terry leaned back slightly, a sad smile touching his mouth. I spent years convincing myself I was over it. The honesty hurt. Not him, her, because she could hear the truth in every word. You weren't. His laugh carried warmth, affection, resignation. No. The answer landed directly in her chest. No, apparently I wasn't. Something shifted inside her. Not attraction. That had already happened. Not affection. That too. Something deeper. Something that felt suspiciously like falling. And that realization terrified her. Because for the first time since they'd met, Nia wasn't wondering whether Terry loved her. She was wondering what happened if she loved him back. The thought stole her breath, and across the room, Terry saw the change in her expression, saw the awareness, saw the fear, saw the possibility. Neither spoke, neither moved. The storm continued outside. But inside the library, everything had changed. Because some truths altered the shape of a relationship forever, and there was no going back after this one. Not for either of them. The contract still existed. The marriage still had rules. The future remained uncertain. Yet none of those things mattered as much as the realization settling quietly between them. Nia Benette had spent years believing she missed her chance with the wrong man, only to discover the right man had been waiting all along. And now, neither of them knew what came next. Thank you so much for staying with us this long. We hope you are enjoying the love story of Nia and Terry. Please like and subscribe. Now let's find out what happens to Nia and Terry's love. After Terry told Nia the truth, the house became dangerous. Not because anything obvious changed. That would have been easier. If Terry had suddenly become awkward, Nia could have handled that. If he had started confessing poetry over breakfast, or looking at her like a man waiting for applause, she could have filed the whole thing under temporary emotional complications and moved forward with dignity. But Terry did none of that. He remained Terry. That was the problem. He still woke before sunrise, still drank coffee black, still reviewed market briefs at the kitchen island, with one knee hooked against the stool and his glasses resting low on his nose, still looked up when she entered the room as though her arrival improved the morning. Still remembered everything. The morning after the confession, Nia entered the kitchen pretending she had slept. She had not. She had stared at the ceiling for 5 hours, replaying every word. I had a crush on you. You weren't mine to interrupt. The sentences had followed her into sleep and waited for her when she woke. Terry was already at the stove, cooking. Because apparently the man could confess a decade-long crush one night and prepare eggs the next morning like a functioning adult. Infuriating. Morning, he said. Nia stopped near the island. Morning? Her voice sounded normal. Mostly. Terry glanced at her, then at the coffee mug waiting beside her usual seat, then back at her. You didn't sleep. Nia narrowed her eyes. Good morning to you too. His mouth curved slightly. I made coffee stronger. Because I didn't sleep? Because you didn't sleep. She stared at the mug, then at him. Do you ever get tired of being right? Not so far. She should not have laughed. She did. The sound softened the room. Terry's shoulders relaxed by a fraction, small enough that anyone else might have missed it. Nia did not miss it. That was new too. She was beginning to notice him the way he had always noticed her, the smallest shifts, the quiet hesitations, the way he only teased when he was trying to make her comfortable, the way he gave her space but never absence. Nia sat at the island and wrapped both hands around the mug. The coffee was exactly how she liked it. Of course it was. For a while they ate in quiet. Not uncomfortable quiet. Not exactly, but aware quiet. A silence that had learned too much overnight. Terry finally set his fork down. Nia. Her pulse betrayed her. Yes? If last night made things difficult, we can pretend it didn't happen. That should have helped. It did not. Nia looked at him across the sunlit kitchen. He meant it. That was the devastating part. He would fold his own heart neatly, place it somewhere private, and behave as though nothing had changed if it made her comfortable. The old Nia would have accepted that. The new Nia, the one wearing his sweatshirt too often, eating his breakfast, laughing in his kitchen, and sleeping poorly because his confession had rearranged her entire understanding of love, could not. No, she said. Terry went still. Nia swallowed. I don't want to pretend it didn't happen. His gaze held hers. Careful, hopeful, restrained, always restrained. Okay, he said quietly. That was all. No demand, no victory, no pressure, just okay. And somehow that single word made her heart ache. Over the next week, Nia discovered that falling in love was inconvenient. It interrupted spreadsheets. It ruined perfectly reasonable workdays. It turned ordinary household moments into evidence. Terry, reaching past her for a coffee cup, became a problem. Terry, laughing softly at an email, became a problem. Terry, standing barefoot in the kitchen at midnight eating cereal out of an expensive bowl, became a significant problem. You're staring, he said without looking up. Nia startled. I am not. You are. You're eating cereal at midnight. I'm aware. You own 12 restaurants. I wanted cereal. That is suspiciously normal. He finally looked at her. Am I not allowed to be normal? No. Good to know. She leaned against the doorway, arms folded. What kind is it? Terry glanced down at the bowl. The sugary kind my grandmother hates. Nia laughed. You rebel. Quietly. I'm learning that about you. The words left her mouth before she could soften them. Terry's expression changed. Just slightly, but enough. The joking air thinned. Nia felt it happen. The subtle shift from playfulness to something warmer, something that stood too close to truth. Terry set the bowl down. What are you learning? She should have deflected. She was excellent at deflecting. Instead, she looked at him. Really looked. At the man she had once considered an unexpected friend, then an inconvenient husband, then a secret she was afraid to name. You don't push, she said softly. Terry did not answer. Nia continued before courage abandoned her. You wait. You make room. You notice everything, but you don't use it against people. His face grew still. That is a generous interpretation. It's an accurate one. His gaze dropped briefly. When he looked back up, something vulnerable had entered his eyes. For a moment, Nia saw the younger version of him. The college boy across the student union pretending not to watch the girl with 3 highlighters. The man who had waited years without demanding repayment for his patience. The husband who was still pretending boundaries existed. Her chest tightened. Terry. His voice was low. Yes? She lost her nerve immediately. Your cereal is getting soggy. For 1 second, he stared at her. Then he laughed. Not polite laughter. Not charming laughter. Real laughter. The kind that lifted his whole face and warmed the kitchen until Nia nearly forgot to breathe. She went upstairs that night knowing 2 things. 1, she was a coward. 2, she was in trouble. The charity gala arrived that Saturday. Nia had forgotten about it completely until Terry mentioned the driver would arrive at 6. She looked up from her laptop. What driver? Terry paused in the doorway of the study. The gala? Nia stared. Terry stared back. Then understanding dawned. You forgot. No, I strategically misplaced the information. You forgot. I am a busy woman. You have the event in 3 calendars. That feels judgmental. It was color-coded. Nia groaned and dropped her forehead onto the desk. Why am I like this? Terry's voice softened. Successful? Annoying. Also successful. She lifted her head enough to glare. He smiled. The warmth of it followed her upstairs as she rushed to get ready. 2 hours later, Nia stood before her mirror in a black satin gown that skimmed her body with understated elegance, and the neckline was modest, the fit graceful, the slit high enough to be interesting but not scandalous. She wore her hair swept back, gold earrings brushing her jaw, makeup soft but polished. She looked composed, which was helpful because she did not feel composed. When she descended the staircase, Terry waited near the foyer. He turned at the sound of her heels, then stopped moving altogether. Nia's fingers tightened lightly around the railing. Terry Kang, who could negotiate billion-dollar deals without blinking, appeared to lose language for several seconds. The silence did unreasonable things to her confidence. Finally, he said, Nia. Just her name. Nothing else, but the way he said it made the air leave her lungs. You look beautiful. The compliment was quiet, not performative, not practiced. It landed exactly where he aimed it. Her chest. Nia smiled because smiling was safer than admitting she suddenly wanted to cross the foyer and touch his face. You clean up nicely yourself. He wore a charcoal tuxedo with a black bow tie, his hair neatly styled, his posture elegant and controlled. Controlled. Always controlled. Except his eyes. His eyes were not controlled at all. Not when they looked at her. Ready? He asked. No. Of course. The gala glittered with wealth, old money, new money, borrowed money, pretending to be old money. Every kind of money was present beneath the chandeliers of the museum ballroom. Cameras flashed when Terry and Nia entered. His hand settled at the small of her back. A simple touch. Public, appropriate, devastating. Nia kept her smile in place as they moved through the room. Donors greeted them. Executives shook Terry's hand. Women studied Nia with open curiosity. Men congratulated Terry with careful calculation. Everyone saw a marriage. Nia wondered if anyone else could feel the lie trembling under the truth. Because that was the problem now. The marriage had started false. But her feelings had not. At the champagne table, an elegant woman in a silver gown approached Terry with a smile that had practiced in mirrors. Terry Kang, she said warmly. I was beginning to think you'd forgotten how to attend these things. Terry's hand did not leave Nia's back. Anya, good to see you. Anya's gaze slid to Nia, cool, assessing. Oh, of course. Your wife. The pause before wife was microscopic. Nia heard it anyway. She smiled. Nia Kang. Terry turned his head slightly. The movement was small, but she felt his attention sharpen. Anya laughed softly. Still getting used to that, I imagine. Nia's smile brightened. Not really. Terry coughed once into his glass. Nia pretended not to notice. Anya's expression flickered. Only briefly, then she excused herself. As soon as she was gone, Terry leaned closer. Nia Kang? She sipped champagne. Legally accurate. You enjoyed that? Immensely. His smile curved close to her ear. I noticed. The warmth of his breath against her skin sent a shiver down her spine. Nia looked away quickly. Too quickly. Terry noticed that too. Of course he did. Later, during dinner, Nia watched Terry from across the table while he spoke with a donor about scholarships. Not investments, not acquisitions. Scholarships. He spoke with quiet conviction about access, opportunity, and the responsibility of wealth to remove barriers rather than decorate itself. Nia felt something in her chest loosen. Marcus had admired ambition. Terry admired purpose. That was the difference. Marcus had once called her driven. Terry understood what drove her. The realization sat with her through dessert, through speeches, through applause. Through the moment Terry stood and accepted an award on behalf of his foundation. He was polished on stage, controlled, elegant. But when his gaze found hers in the crowd, something softened. Just for her. Nia's heart answered before her mind could stop it. Oh, there it was. The truth. Not loud, not dramatic, just simple. She loved him. She loved Terry Kang, the man who held her hand under a table when her heart was breaking. The man who sent breakfast without making pity look like pity. The man who remembered who she had been before she became impressive. The man who waited. The man who stayed. Nia sat perfectly still while the ballroom applauded. Inside, everything changed. The dance came later. Terry offered his hand with a slight bow. A ridiculous bow. A charming bow. A bow she should not have found attractive. Mrs. Kang. Nia placed her hand in his. Mr. Kang? He led her onto the dance floor. The music was slow, soft, a classic love song played by a live band near the stage. Terry's hand settled at her waist. Her hand rested against his shoulder. They moved together easily. Too easily. As though their bodies had been waiting for their emotions to catch up. Nia looked up at him. He was already watching her. You're quiet, he said. That happens occasionally. Rarely. She smiled. Then the smile faded. Terry. His gaze sharpened with immediate concern. What is it? She almost told him, right there, under chandeliers, in front of donors and executives in society, women with sharp eyes. She almost said, I love you. But fear caught the words by the throat, because saying it would change everything. And what if he thought it was gratitude? What if he thought it was confusion? What if he thought it was the contract, the proximity, the house, the timing? What if love became another thing people could question? Nia swallowed. Thank you. His expression softened. For what? She could have said for the dance, for the gala, for dinner. Instead, she told part of the truth. For waiting until I could see you. Terry stopped moving, only for half a beat. Then his hand tightened at her waist. Not enough to hurt, enough to tell her he understood. His voice lowered. Nia. She looked down because his eyes were too much. He leaned slightly closer. I would have waited longer. The words broke something tender open inside her. Nia looked back up. This time she did not look away. They left the gala before midnight. Neither said much in the car. The city passed outside the windows in ribbons of gold and red light. Terry sat beside her, close enough that his sleeve brushed her arm each time the car turned. Nia kept her hands folded in her lap. Trying to behave. Trying to think. Failing at both. When they reached the estate, the house was quiet. Staff had gone, lights had been dimmed. The night air carried the faint scent of rain. Nia stepped onto the balcony outside the library instead of going upstairs. She needed air. A second later, Terry joined her. Of course he did. For a while they stood side by side, looking out over the dark gardens. The formal edges of the estate softened beneath moonlight. In the distance, the city shimmered faintly beyond the trees. You've been different tonight, Terry said. Nia closed her eyes briefly. I know. Did I do something? The question hurt. Not because he asked. Because he was still careful. Still checking for damage. Still ready to step back if she needed space. Nia turned toward him. No. Terry faced her fully. The moonlight touched his cheekbones, softened his jaw, turned his dark eyes almost black. He looked like patience given human form, and Nia was so tired of being afraid. You did everything right, she said. His breath shifted. Nia. She stepped closer. He did not move, did not reach, did not assume. Always waiting, always giving her the choice. So she made one. Nia lifted her hand and touched his jaw. Terry went still beneath her palm. His skin was warm. The faintest shadow of evening stubble brushed her fingertips. His eyes closed for 1 second. One beautiful, helpless second. When he opened them again, the restraint in them was nearly painful. Nia, he said again. This time it sounded like a warning, a prayer, a plea. She smiled softly. For someone who waited 10 years, you're very nervous. His laugh was low, unsteady. You have no idea. I think I do. No, he whispered. You don't. The air between them thinned. Her hand slid gently along his jaw. His gaze dropped to her mouth, then back to her eyes. Still asking. Still waiting. Nia rose onto her toes and kissed him. For one suspended second, Terry did not move. Then his control broke quietly. One hand slid to her waist. The other came up to cradle the side of her face. He kissed her like a man afraid of wanting too much and unable to want less. Slow, careful, deeply tender. Not a claim, a confession. Nia felt it everywhere, in the warmth of his palm, in the slight tremor of his breath, in the way he held her as though the moment mattered too much to rush. She had spent years imagining love as lightning, a sudden strike, a dramatic revelation, a man across a room. But this was different. This was warmth gathering over time. A hand beneath a table, coffee after heartbreak, breakfast on tired mornings, laughter in quiet kitchens. A man who remembered. When they finally parted, Terry rested his forehead lightly against hers. Neither spoke. The silence was full enough. Nia kept her eyes closed. Her hand remained against his chest over the steady beat of his heart. The contract still existed. The expiration date still existed. The risks still existed. None of it mattered in that moment. Because for the first time in her life, Nia Benette was not in love with an idea. She was in love with the man in front of her. And this time, the right man loved her back. Happiness lasted 13 days, not 12. Nia knew because she counted them afterward. 13 mornings, 13 breakfasts, 13 evenings where she no longer had to pretend her feelings were friendship. 13 days of discovering that loving Terry Kang felt surprisingly ordinary. And that was what made it extraordinary. There were no grand declarations, no dramatic scenes, no sweeping speeches, just small things. Terry reaching for her hand during walks through the garden. Terry leaving notes beside her coffee mug. Terry kissing her forehead when he passed behind her chair. Terry existing. The man had somehow become her favorite part of every day, which was exactly why losing it hurt so much. The disaster began on a Monday. Nia was halfway through a client presentation when her phone exploded. Messages, emails, news alerts, missed calls. Enough notifications to suggest either a market collapse or a celebrity scandal. She ignored them. For 6 minutes. Then her assistant entered the conference room, pale, concerned, and carrying a tablet. The moment Nia saw her expression, her stomach dropped. What happened? The assistant handed over the tablet without speaking. Nia looked down. The headline consumed the screen. Billionaire heirs contract, marriage exposed. The world seemed to tilt. For one suspended second, she forgot how to breathe. The article continued beneath the headline. Anonymous sources, legal filings, contract details, speculation, analysis, photographs. Enough truth to be dangerous. Enough lies to be devastating. The presentation ended immediately. Nia barely remembered leaving. Barely remembered getting into her car. Barely remembered the drive home. By the time she reached the estate, satellite news vans had already gathered outside the gates. Reporters, cameras, questions, chaos. The life she'd carefully built was suddenly public property, and she hated it. Terry was waiting in his office. The moment Nia entered, he stood. Relief flashed across his face, quick, immediate, human. Nia. She closed the door behind her. What happened? Terry looked exhausted. His tie was gone, his sleeves rolled. Several phones sat on the desk. 2 attorneys occupied chairs near the windows. A public relations specialist stood beside a whiteboard. The room looked like a war zone for wealthy people. We had a leak. Nia laughed, a short, humorless sound. No kidding. One of the attorneys wisely left the room. The others followed. Within seconds, they were alone. Silence settled. Heavy. Complicated. Nia folded her arms. Waiting. Terry rubbed a hand across his face. Yeah. We're tracing the source. Does it matter? The question hung between them. Neither answered. Because they both knew the truth. The damage had already happened. The story was everywhere. Social media, business news, television, podcasts. Everywhere. People weren't discussing a contract anymore. They were discussing them, their marriage, their motives, their lives. And somehow strangers had opinions about all of it. The realization made Nia furious and vulnerable, a dangerous combination. What happens now? Terry looked at her, directly, steadily, the same way he always did. We tell the truth. The answer should have comforted her. Instead, it scared her, because the truth was no longer simple. The marriage had started as a contract. That part was true. The feelings had not. That part was true too. The problem was that nobody would believe the second truth, not after learning the first. The next 48 hours were brutal. News outlets replayed the story endlessly. Commentators debated motives. Financial analysts speculated about inheritance implications. Society pages dissected their relationship. The internet did what the internet always did, made everything worse. Nia tried to ignore it, failed, repeatedly. One evening, she found herself scrolling through comments. A terrible decision, a catastrophic decision, an emotionally irresponsible decision. She knew all of this, yet she kept reading. Gold digger, publicity stunt, convenient arrangement, calculated move, contract wife. The words blurred together, each one landing harder than it should, because none of those people knew her. None of them knew Terry. None of them knew what had happened between them. Yet somehow they sounded so certain. Nia. She looked up. Terry stood in the doorway, concern already written across his face. He crossed the room, took the tablet gently from her hands, then turned it off, without a word, without a lecture, without judgment, just protection. The gesture nearly broke her. 3 days later, Chairwoman Kang arrived. The atmosphere changed the moment she entered the house. Staff moved differently, security increased. The air itself seemed to tighten. Nia found Terry and his grandmother in the library. She hadn't intended to eavesdrop. She genuinely hadn't. But then she heard her name and stopped. Nia was never supposed to become part of this. Chairwoman Kang's voice remained calm, which somehow made it worse. Terry's reply arrived immediately. She isn't part of this. The old woman laughed softly, a dangerous sound. Terry? Silence followed. Then, you developed feelings. Not a question, a statement. The kind only grandmothers could make. The kind impossible to deny. Nia's heartbeat accelerated. Inside the library, Terry remained quiet. His silence answered for him. Chairwoman Kang sighed. You should have told me. Terry's response came low, controlled. I wasn't asking permission. Nia smiled despite herself. Then the smile vanished. Because Chairwoman Kang spoke again, and this time her words struck differently. You built a solution and created a complication. The sentence lingered. Complication. The word echoed. Complication. Not love, not marriage, not happiness. Complication. Nia stepped away before she could hear more. But the damage was already done. The word followed her upstairs. Complication. A problem. An obstacle. A variable nobody planned for. The thought settled into old insecurities, into old fears, into vulnerable places already bruised by public scrutiny. By midnight, she had convinced herself of something terrible. Not that Terry didn't love her. She knew he did. The problem was worse. She wasn't sure he would have chosen this path if not for the contract. And uncertainty, once planted, grows quickly. The argument happened 2 nights later. Not because either of them wanted it, because fear finally found a voice. The house was quiet. Rain tapped softly against the windows. Terry entered the bedroom carrying tea. Nia sat on the edge of the bed, lost in thought, lost in doubt, lost. One look at her face and Terry immediately knew something was wrong. He set the tea aside. Nia. The concern in his voice hurt. Everything about him hurt lately. Because she loved him, because she believed him, because she didn't know how to separate that from everything else. What are we doing? The question surprised them both. Terry froze. What do you mean? Nia stood, restless, agitated, afraid. Are we in love because of the contract? His expression changed instantly. Pain, not anger. Pain. No. The answer came without hesitation. But fear is irrational. And once fear begins talking, it rarely listens. You already loved me. The words rushed out. You already knew. Nia. I didn't. Her voice cracked. The sound startled her. Because she wasn't angry, she was scared. Terrified. What if I only got here because we lived together? The silence that followed felt devastating. Terry stared at her, not because he lacked an answer, because he hated the question. You think I manipulated you? The realization entered his voice slowly, like a wound opening. No. Then what are you saying? Nia looked away, because she didn't know, not exactly, only that the world felt unstable. The headlines, the scrutiny, the pressure, the exposure. Everything had become too much. I don't know. The answer was honest and terrible, because uncertainty can hurt more than rejection. Terry stood perfectly still. For several seconds, neither moved. Then he nodded once, slowly, as though accepting something. Not agreeing, accepting. I understand. The words should have comforted her. Instead, they shattered something. Because Terry sounded tired. Not frustrated. Tired. The kind of tired that comes from carrying hope for too long. Terry, no. His voice remained gentle. That made it worse. If you need space, take it. The generosity nearly broke her. She wanted him to fight, wanted him to argue, wanted him to tell her she was wrong. Instead, he respected her fear. And somehow, that hurt most of all. The next morning, Nia packed. Not everything, just enough. A few suitcases, work clothes, personal items, essentials. The sight made her feel physically ill, because every folded shirt felt like a mistake. Every packed box felt wrong. But she couldn't stay. Not while she was questioning everything. Not while she was afraid her feelings might be tangled with circumstance. The front door opened before she reached it. Terry had come home early. For one suspended moment, both simply stared. Nia holding luggage. Terry standing in the foyer. Neither prepared. Neither ready. The silence felt endless. Finally, Terry spoke. You're leaving. Not angry, not accusing, just hurt. Nia's eyes burned. Temporarily. The words sounded weak, even to her. Terry nodded. Slowly. Once, the movement looked painful. I see. No, you don't. The thought screamed through her, because if he understood, maybe this wouldn't hurt so much. Maybe she wouldn't feel like she was breaking her own heart. Maybe she wouldn't feel like she was breaking his. Neither moved, neither spoke. The distance between them suddenly felt enormous, the largest distance she'd ever crossed. Or failed to cross. Finally, Nia whispered, I'm sorry. Terry smiled, a small smile, a sad one, the kind she'd never seen before. I know. The answer undid her, completely. But he didn't stop her, didn't ask her to stay, didn't make promises, didn't plead. Because Terry Kang loved her enough to respect her choice, even when that choice destroyed him. The front door closed quietly behind her. Terry remained standing exactly where she'd left him, hands at his sides, heart breaking in perfect silence, and for the first time in years, he stopped fighting for what he wanted. He let her go. Nia Benette lasted 22 days. 22 days away from Terry, 22 days in her apartment, 22 days pretending space would bring clarity. It didn't. It brought misery. The first week felt productive. She worked, organized, focused, made lists. The second week felt lonely. The third felt unbearable. Every success felt strangely muted. Every evening felt too quiet. Every morning felt wrong. Because somewhere along the way, Terry Kang had become woven into the fabric of her life. The coffee tasted different without him. Breakfast felt unnecessary without him reminding her to eat. The apartment felt smaller. The laughter felt absent. The realization arrived one Tuesday night while she stood in her kitchen staring at a carton of eggs. Terry would have made breakfast. The thought appeared casually. Then another followed. Terry would have remembered the presentation today. Then another. Terry would have called to ask how it went. Then another. Terry would have known she was upset before she admitted it. Nia sat down heavily at the kitchen table because suddenly she understood something. She didn't miss living in the estate. She missed Terry, the man. Not the house, not the contract, not the convenience, him. The realization should have felt triumphant. Instead, it hurt because she had left him. Saturday brunch with Lena was a mistake. A catastrophic mistake. The kind of mistake that exposes truths you are actively avoiding. Nia should have known better. Her younger sister possessed the emotional subtlety of a wrecking ball. They had barely ordered coffee before Lena narrowed her eyes. "You look terrible." Nia stared. "Good morning to you too." "I'm serious." "I slept." "You have concealer on." Nia froze. Lena nodded. "Exactly." Caught. Marcus arrived moments later, carrying pastries. The traitor took one look at Nia and immediately sighed. Not a good sign. Not at all. "What?" Nia demanded. Marcus sat down. "You left him." The directness stunned her. Across the table, Lena nodded. Aggressively, like a witness confirming testimony. Nia looked between them, then groaned. "I hate both of you." "No, you don't." Lena smiled. "Unfortunately." The waitress delivered coffee. Nia reached for hers immediately. Self-defense. Marcus waited until she took a sip, then said, "He looks awful." The coffee nearly went down the wrong pipe. Wonderful. Just wonderful. "What?" Marcus shrugged. "Terry." Nia looked away, immediately. Dangerous topic. Very dangerous. Lena leaned forward. "He's miserable, him was sit. I don't need updates." "Then stop asking questions with your face." Nia closed her eyes, because somehow that sentence made perfect sense. And because it was probably true. The silence stretched. Finally, Marcus sighed. A thoughtful sound. Not judgmental, not angry, just reflective. "You know something I've never understood." Nia instantly distrusted the question. "What?" Marcus leaned back. "The fact that you never noticed." Her stomach tightened. "Noticed what?" Marcus exchanged a look with Lena, then laughed softly. The sound carried disbelief, the kind reserved for impossible situations. "Oh, wow." "What?" "He really never told you." Nia's pulse accelerated. Slowly, steadily, dangerously. "Marcus, you honestly don't know." "Know what?" Lena covered her mouth, already smiling. Marcus looked genuinely amazed, then shook his head. "I can't believe he never told you." Nia set down her coffee, carefully, deliberately, because suddenly her hands didn't feel steady. "Marcus." The warning finally landed. He sobered immediately, then spoke. "Terry had the biggest crush on you in college." The world stopped. Completely. Nia blinked. Once, twice, 3 times. "Excuse me?" Marcus laughed. Not because it was funny, because he still couldn't believe it. "The entire fraternity knew." Nia stared. "The entire fraternity?" "Everyone." Her mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. No words emerged. Because that was impossible. Completely impossible, wasn't it? Then memories surfaced. Dozens of them. Hundreds. Moments she'd never examined properly. Terry appearing at campus events. Terry remembering details. Terry somehow always knowing her name. Terry volunteering for projects she participated in. Terry attending lectures that had nothing to do with his major. Terry. 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 Oh my God, Marcus pointed. Exactly. Nia sat frozen. The pieces rearranged themselves rapidly, painfully, perfectly. Years, not months. Not since the engagement party, years. Terry hadn't fallen in love with her because they got married. He hadn't fallen in love with her because they lived together. He hadn't fallen in love with her because of proximity. The man had been carrying feelings for nearly a decade. The realization shattered every remaining fear because suddenly the answer became obvious. The contract hadn't created their relationship. The contract had simply removed the distance. Tears filled her eyes. Lena reached across the table, squeezed her hand softly. About time. Across town, Terry sat in a conference room reviewing divorce paperwork. The irony was almost funny. Almost. The attorney spoke. He listened. Mostly, not really. His attention drifted repeatedly toward memories, toward regrets, toward Nia. Always Nia. The conference room door opened. His assistant entered, approached quietly, whispered something. Terry frowned, then looked toward the hallway. Confused. Moments later, he stood, heart suddenly accelerating, because there were very few reasons Nia Benette would appear unannounced, and none of them felt safe. Nia drove like a woman possessed, not recklessly, purposefully. There was a difference, mostly. The entire drive to Terry's office, her thoughts raced. Every memory looked different now. Every conversation, every gesture, every moment. How many opportunities had she missed? How many signs? How many chances to see what stood directly in front of her? Too many. Far too many. By the time she reached the building, she was breathless. By the time she reached the executive floor, she was terrified. Not because she doubted him, because she finally didn't. The receptionist stood immediately. Mrs. Kang? Nia didn't stop. Where is he? The woman blinked, then pointed. Nia walked. Fast. Determined. Certain. The conference room door stood partially open. She pushed it wider. And froze. Terry sat at the far end of the table. Several attorneys occupied surrounding chairs. Legal documents covered the polished wood surface. Everyone looked up. Silence descended instantly. Nia's eyes found Terry. The sight of him nearly stole her breath because he looked tired. Not physically, emotionally, like hope had become expensive, like missing her hurt. The realization nearly destroyed her. One attorney cleared his throat. Should we leave? Terry never looked away from Nia. The room emptied immediately, doors closed. Silence returned. For several long seconds, neither moved. Neither spoke. Then Terry stood, slowly, carefully, as though sudden movement might break something. Nia. Her name sounded different, hopeful, afraid, both. Nia crossed the room. One step, then another, until only a few feet remained between them. She could see surprise in his eyes, confusion, caution, love, always love. Terry, his voice lowered. What are you doing here? Nia laughed. The sound broke halfway through, because tears had arrived. Apparently without permission. Wonderful. I'm fixing something. The answer confused him. She could tell. Good. He deserved a little confusion. He'd been carrying the entire emotional intelligence of this relationship for months. Terry. His gaze held hers, steady, patient, waiting, always waiting. I'm in love with you. The words escaped. Simple, direct, true. The room went perfectly still. Terry stared, as though he wasn't entirely certain he'd heard correctly. Nia smiled through tears. See? His breath caught. Actually caught. The sight was unexpectedly adorable. She continued. That's what happens when you remember someone's breakfast habits for 10 years. The corner of his mouth twitched. Hope appeared, small, fragile, beautiful. Nia? No. She stepped closer, close enough to touch him, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from his body, close enough to see every emotion crossing his face. You loved me before the contract. Terry swallowed. Yes. You loved me before coffee. Yes. You loved me before the engagement party. His eyes softened. Yes. The answer settled between them. Solid. Unshakable. Certain. Nia nodded, then placed both hands against his chest, directly over his heart. Good. Terry looked confused. Again. Excellent. Good? Because now I know. His voice dropped. Know what? Nia smiled. The kind of smile that begins in the heart. The kind impossible to fake. That if I'd met you first. Tears blurred her vision. But Terry, I think maybe I did. The silence that followed felt sacred. Then Terry laughed. A short, helpless laugh. Half joy, half relief. All love. The sound broke whatever restraint remained. He pulled her into his arms, held her tightly, as though letting go might restart the nightmare. Nia buried her face against his shoulder. Home. The realization arrived immediately. Not the estate, not the marriage, not the contract. Him. Home. 3 months later, the contract officially expired. Nia and Terry sat together in the library. The same library where everything had changed. The same library where he told her the truth. The same library where she finally learned how to listen. A folder rested on the table. The contract. Finished. Expired. Complete. Terry looked at it. Then at her. Then back at it. Finally, he closed the folder. Gently. Deliberately. Well? Nia smiled. Well? A long silence followed. Then Terry stood, walked around the table, and lowered himself onto one knee. Nia's breath vanished. Completely. Terry. His smile appeared immediately, warm, familiar, beloved. This one isn't a contract. Tears filled her eyes. Again. At this point, they should have paid rent. The man made her cry constantly. Good. His gaze never left hers. Nia Benette. The room seemed brighter, warmer, smaller. Just the two of them. Exactly where she wanted to be. I spent years waiting. His voice softened. And if I had to, I'd wait longer. A tear escaped. Then another. But I would really prefer not to. Nia laughed through them. Naturally, because somehow Terry always managed to make her laugh. Even now. Especially now. He opened the ring box. Simple. Elegant. Perfect. Just like him. Will you marry me because you choose me? The question shattered her heart in the best possible way. Nia smiled, then nodded, then laughed, then cried, then did all three at once. Every day. Terry closed his eyes briefly. Relief, joy, love. Everything crossing his face at once. Then he slid the ring onto her finger, stood, and kissed her. Slowly, tenderly. Like the answer mattered. Like she mattered. Like they finally understood what had been true all along. The wrong man had captured her attention. The right man had captured her heart. And this time she knew the difference. Thank you so much for staying with us this long. We hope you enjoyed the love story of Nia and Terry. Please like and subscribe.